Well, hey everybody, today I have a special treat. I have Stephanie Altdoerffer. Did I say that right?
Yes, you did.
Oh, yes!
Thank you.
Today's my lucky day. And I've asked Stephanie to drop by. She's with Arizona Best Real Estate, and Stephanie is well known in our community here in the Scottsdale, Phoenix area. And I thought, it might be interesting to get your perspective on the lending process because we certainly, as home lenders, have our perspective, but really, we work really closely with the real estate community. Mm-hmm. And it really does, become this whole three-legged stool between title, real estate, and lending to ensure that we're delivering. Well, let's just dive in. Okay. So you shared with me previously, you just had some recent situations with some other lenders, not us, that, kind of gave you cause for concern about just the home buying process and lending process. So have at it, girl.
Okay. So my last two buyers came to me with lending already in place. And once we identified the home that they wanted to make an offer on, in this market, I'm mentioning that we might be able to ask the seller for concessions.
Yeah.
Sometimes I have to explain what concessions are and how that looks. And these are even, these are older buyers, actually. They're not first-time buyers. But when I said, well, let's get them to cover your closing costs. And I got a blank stare. I got a wow, like closing costs on top of my down payment. They just didn't quite understand what that was going to look like. Yeah. And I was surprised. I was surprised that they didn't have at least some concept that in addition to their down payment, there's going to be some other money that they're going to have to come up with.
Yeah. Unless the seller's paying all of the closing costs, which sometimes in this market we see and sometimes we don't. But so let's kind of walk through that. I was sharing with you before we started to record that, every lender kind of has a different approach. And this probably comes down to the loan officer, not necessarily the lending company. Mm-hmm. And with that, I can only speak to what we do, but because it's not my first rodeo, we do hear a lot and see a lot, and we talk to a lot of different buyers that maybe have already been pre-approved with another lender. I am adamant that people understand their numbers before they get in the car with you.
Yes, absolutely.
Because what we don't want is that to happen. Mm-hmm. So the process for us is, we're going to take somebody through that pre-approval process, the application, the credit, the documentation. Oh, here's another thing. I don't know if you've seen this yet, but there are lenders out there, really big lenders, vertical lenders, that are saying, hey, don't even give us your documentation until you go under contract. And I'm like, what? In Arizona, we are actually protected a little bit because as a real estate agent, if you're local and you understand the local forms, we're using actually a pre-qualification form. It's part of the Arizona purchase contract, and it will denote whether we have received the documentation.
Yes.
But if you're using, let's say, a national lender that isn't familiar with that, you might just get a generic pre-qualification letter. Right. And it may not get into the fact that they haven't actually seen the documentation. Mm-hmm. Why is that important? Because the devil's in the details.
Yes,
people don't necessarily know what they make. I mean, in general, but if it's variable hours, if there's other things, there's always something going on. So getting that documentation up front, it's kind of the last piece of what is required for a lender to truly not only be able to give a finance analysis, but to get into strategy. And strategy is the most important thing because it's never a one size fits all. And maybe it is an easy 30% down conventional loan, but maybe there's something else going on. And that's the fun part still for us, is just to kind of dive into the strategy.
Right.
Yeah. So if you are working with a lender and they haven't given you some type of fee worksheet, and this is a fee worksheet showing your down payment and your estimated closing costs prior to getting in the car with your real estate agent, you might just want to ask for it. And it's okay to do that because now you have some awareness and it helps your real estate agent because then hey, closing costs are whatever, $8,000. So you're going to ask for the $8,000 or $5,000 or whatever you feel like you can negotiate. But that open line of communication is just key.
Right. Well, and then we can continue to work together because we're finding now that even if the seller agrees to concessions up front, that we go through the inspection period and now there's some other things, but they don't want to do the repairs. So can we get a little more? But you don't want to leave anything on the table either. You don't want them to agree to something that the buyer can't actually take.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And that is so important. I'm glad you mentioned that. So every loan program is going to have a maximum amount that the seller can contribute. So depending on the loan program and what was maybe already initially negotiated, very often we're working closely with our real estate agents on saying, hey, how much more is allowed, one, for the loan program, and then
Right.
two, if that amount that you're trying to negotiate exceeds the closing costs,
Right.
that's where when Stephanie says we're leaving it on the table, it's not like the buyer gets that money cash back.
Right.
So very often we're very strategic in that, okay, maybe counter with this amount of a price reduction and all that fun stuff,
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, and that's why the communication is so important. And I think from the client standpoint, to know that we're working together to make sure that their money is being allocated appropriately,
Yes.
and just, that we're a team. I think it's very, very important.
Yeah. And again, I do want to reiterate this. Unless you're using a VA home loan, you're likely not getting your earnest money back because it will just be applied to the down payment. So that is a piece of it. But then the next piece is if you happen to have the seller contributing towards your closing costs, all of your closing costs, and then there's extra money on the table, it's not like you get that money back.
Right.
So in most cases, we're going to try to work it as close to the penny as we can. But if there is an overage, then in most cases, the lender will just do a principal reduction against your loan. So, that's
Right.
important to know. Not every lender, though. So. All right, what else? What other juicy tidbits do you have?
I mean, from a lending standpoint, another situation that we have, this has been a while ago, but it is something important to think about. And that's, with the interest rate, was it just a hypothetical, or did you delve into what that's going to look like based on their debt to income and all of that? Because it does matter what price range the buyer is going to be looking at.
Yep.
Then they get under contract and find out, oh, my interest rate is this. I would never have been shopping in that price range.
Yeah.
And we have had that happen too.
Yeah. So the credit score and the loan program and the strategy and the dwelling type and the occupancy and one more thing, right? It's like there's so much that goes into interest rate. And honestly, I think that this is so challenging for people that aren't in the industry because I think people think like you just pick up the phone, you're like, hey, what's your rate? There's never a standard answer.
Right.
So if there is a lender saying, well, rates are around X, that may not be your rate.
Right.
Because all of those factors that I mentioned will go into driving the rate. And a lot of people don't realize that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, which are the government-sponsored enterprises that back most of the conventional loans in our country, they have what's called loan level pricing adjustments. What is that? That means those things that I just mentioned will impact interest rate and or cost on the loan. So down payment. Maybe you were pre-qualified with 30% down. And then maybe something's changed and you want to do 5% down. That's going to be an impact to your interest rate. So again, lots of variables that go into the process. And my best advice is, again, just working with a real estate and a lending team that can kind of approach this and work together to either get seller concessions or at the very least, just make sure buyers understand the numbers.
Yes.
And how they all break down. So when you are asking to get the pre-qualification letter from the lender, what is your position with regard to the amount that the lender puts on the pre-qualification letter? So there's lots of different opinions. And like you do a lot of listings for sellers and then you also represent a lot of buyers. So I just kind of want to know from your perspective and then I'll share with you mine.
Okay. Well, this just came up. One of our buyers, he wanted to match the pre-qual to the offer so that it looked like if they counter, they're not going to qualify.
Yeah.
And I said, absolutely not. You need to have your max qualification on there. And if the contract is less, great. You look like this really solid, well-qualified buyer.
Yeah.
So basically, he wanted to have a different pre-qual for each, offer that we made.
Yes.
So mine is put it all out there, and what is your max? Now you're talking about the loan amount line, and then because I've seen it with the loan amount on one line and the qualified up to purchase price in that line below.
Yeah. Yeah. But depending on the down payment, I mean, it's, so.
Right.
But the point here is that there's clarity on that pre-qualification letter, but we get a lot of pushback from real estate agents and just saying, hey, I want it for the exact amount we're going to make the offer for. And I'm like, well, okay, but does that really make sense? Like, I mean,
No,
we can show the strength of the buyer. The buyer, this is a negotiation. This is what y'all do. And, if I were a seller, I'd want to know that somebody wasn't so cutting it so close on what they could qualify for.
Right.
And so I've always just been so fascinated by the real estate community. Not you, certainly not plenty of others out there, but, we do get a lot of that,
Well, I have questioned as a listing agent looking at the pre-qual and thinking, wow, this is at the top of their budget. So, and maybe it is.
Yeah.
And that's fine too, but.
Yeah. So do you contact, as a listing agent, when you get the pre-qualification letter and the offer in, do you contact the lender?
Yes.
And what do you say?
I'll ask, did you actually verify all of the boxes that are checked?
Yeah. Step one.
It's easy to, anybody can fill in a box.
Yeah.
So, and then, just talking about the timelines and making sure that the contract is matching what the lender is actually going to be able to do as far as close date and, meeting all those deadlines.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think especially important for out-of-state lenders that aren't familiar with the local purchase contract of whatever state it is that you're in. So again, just, really honing in on that. I think I would want to know that. Also, just, the appraisal process. I think the appraisal process is one of these kind of hidden gems, if you will, that is so important to the overall process when a home loan's being used. And so, give me your thoughts on just, are you asking about that? Are you concerned about that? Have you had any issues with that at all recently?
No, I haven't had any issues lately, but from a buyer standpoint, we were competing. Yes, there are multiple offers still happening.
I know.
Two times this week, we used an escalation clause.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
It's so crazy. It's not what you hear in the media.
Right. And we won, but one reason we did get a multiple counteroffer. This just happened yesterday. And I had a conversation with the lender and was able to find out that the buyer got an appraisal waiver.
Yes.
The buyer and the property got an appraisal waiver. So we did the additional clause addendum and countered back with waiving the appraisal and bumped up our price just a little bit and sealed the deal.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
And then, is part of that also just the ability to close and how quickly lenders can close. So there's a lot of capacity right now in mortgage lending, which means that, like in our case, we can close in 10 days, especially if we have a buyer that has done all the things that I presented,
right.
And they're ready to go, like we're ready to go. And many times we also find that helps win in these multiple offer scenarios.
Yes.
So
particularly if the house is vacant, this is a seller that is ready, time is money. So if we can get it closed in 10 days versus 30 days with buyer B, let's go with buyer A.
Yeah. So as we wrap up, tell me kind of the top 2 or 3 things that you're talking with your buyers about today.
It's both sides. If it's a home that's been sitting on the market for 60 days, 90 days, and sometimes 6 months, we're talking about let's go in and let's get the best deal we possibly can.
Yeah.
But if it's been on the market 2 or 3 days, the conversation is much different. It's what do we need to do to position ourselves for you to get this home? Because, and if it's really nice, everybody else has been there too.
Yeah.
They've all been there, and it's probably some of the same buyers that are looking at the last house that you didn't get. Guess what? Now this one's on the market. It's available. Those same buyers are in there trying to get that house too.
Yeah.
So that, it just depends on the situation, just depends on the buyer.
Yeah. And the property.
Yes.
Is what I'm hearing you say.
At the property, yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. The nice ones are going so fast, and then the rest of it just sits. And it's very unfortunate for the sellers. And I've had those sellers. And, if it's not just tip top, I don't know if you saw my video, my before and after video.
I love what you're doing and the videos where you're kind of showing the visual. It is so cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, be sure to follow her if you're not.
Yeah.
Well, Stephanie, thanks so much for dropping by.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. 480-725-0150. You can call that number or text it, and we'd be happy to help you through the home buying process.